It never ceases to amaze me how much trouble kids can get up to in the milliseconds a day you're not watching them like a hawk. One time, I took a phone call in the other room for 2 minutes. I came back to find my 3-year-old daughter had somehow stripped naked, opened the door and used the front lawn sprinklers to take a shower. Kids, right? Still, I don't know what I would do without her. She just started kindergarten in the fall and the days feel strangely quiet without her screaming. But just when my life was beginning to get peaceful again, she managed to get up to trouble. And this time, the solution isn't as simple as keeping the sprinklers off. If I leave them on, she always seems to find her way out to the front yard. No, this problem is serious. It all started with Mrs. Frazzle. Miss Frazzle is the kind of woman who starts wearing Christmas sweaters with cat hair all over them at the beginning of November. And she decided that since her favorite holiday was merely a month and change away, she was going to have all the students write letters to Santa Claus. Ordinarily, that would be fine. But as Mrs. Frazzle's teaching abilities don't quite match her enthusiasm for cats and candy cane flavored liqueur, the students' letters got sent out with some spelling errors. As far as I could tell though, my daughter is the only one who sent her letter out to Satan instead of Santa. Normally, that wouldn't be a problem. Just another funny story to add to the highlight reel that gets told when the family gets together at Christmas. The problem is though, we got a letter back. The envelope was black and it smelled faintly of charcoal. And when I opened it up, a piece of folded paper that must have been at least 500 years old fell out. Dear Sarah, thank you so much for your letter. Would you believe that almost nobody bothers to write to me anymore? Well, nobody except Satanists, but those guys are weirdos. I have carefully considered your request for a life-size living and breathing teddy bear, and I believe that our doctors down here have been able to put together a reasonable approximation of what you want. Frank and Teddy is scheduled to arrive shortly after you receive this letter. Yours truly, Satan. I must have looked rather stupid as I stood there staring at the letter in my hands, my mouth flapping open and closed like a fish as I tried to put my thoughts in order. But I wager I looked even stupider when I turned around to see a 7-foot-tall teddy bear standing behind me and I screamed like a little girl. Frank and Teddy seemed unfazed by my reaction and really, I'm sure he's probably used to it. He was patched together with various bits of ragged cloth and covered in what looked suspiciously like bloodstains. One of his eyes was a little black button, and the other looked like a glowing ember set somewhere deep in the back of his head. He spoke in a booming, monotonous baritone that made me wonder if his vocal cords had been sung by hellfire. I am Frank and Teddy. I am here to love you. Okay, wow, I said, nodding my head vigorously until I realized I was nodding for no reason and I stopped. Are you Sarah? Frank and Teddy boomed out. No, I'm Sarah's dad, I replied. Listen, I don't really think that... Where is Sarah? Well, she's at school right now and... Then I will go to school so that I may love her. Wait a second. School is over now and she'll be home any moment. But you can't... Then I shall wait here, Teddy replied. Do you have any souls of the damned? He said. I need souls of the damned to sustain myself. No, I'm afraid we don't. Cheetos are also fine. Oh, well I do have those. I'll help myself. I looked back down at the letter as Frank and Teddy wandered into my kitchen, and I saw that there was a customer service number written on the back. But before I could call it, I heard a scream behind me. I turned around and I saw Sarah standing in the doorway, mouth hanging open as she stared at Frank and Teddy, rummaging through our cabinets and throwing things on the floor in search for his Cheetos. Now Sarah, honey, don't be scared, I said. But Sarah shot past me and leapt on Frank and Teddy's leg, wrapping herself around it so that she was lifted off the ground whenever he took a step. He's perfect, Daddy, she screamed gleefully. I can't wait to take him to show and tell. Wait, really? I asked, flabbergasted. Hold on, you can't bring a monster teddy bear to... Are you Sarah? Frank and Teddy's booming voice cut me off again. Yes, Sarah shouted. Frank and Teddy took a knee. My lady, he said, I have been enlisted by the Dark Lord Satan to serve you at your pleasure. I will love and protect you, and tear your enemies to shreds if need be. Cool, Sarah shouted, leaping to her feet and hopping around Frank and Teddy in circles. Not knowing what else to do, I typed the customer service number on the back of the letter into my phone with shaking hands. It rang once, and then a tired female voice answered. Pal customer service, how may I help you today? Wait, did you just say how may I help you? The voice on the other end sighed. It's not my joke, she said. It's just something management forces us to say. Okay, I said. Listen, I think there's been some sort of mistake. The woman sighed again. Look, all heaven and hell placements are final. The appeals process is really more of a formality. What? I said. No, I'm talking about the 7-foot-tall monster teddy bear that just showed up at my house. Oh, the woman said, her tone relaxing a bit. You must be the Rogers household. Yes, that's right, I replied. Satan wanted to let you know that he hopes your daughter enjoys the gift. But that sadly, he'll be out of the office until next Wednesday, so he'll check back with you then. Well, can I maybe return it until then? No. The woman said flatly. So I'm stuck with the giant monster teddy bear until Satan calls me next week. No, of course not, the woman said. Oh, thank God, I replied, somewhat regretting my phrase. Satan won't be calling you, she said. He has you scheduled for a face-to-face appointment. A few croaking sounds escaped my throat as she asked me if there was anything else I needed. And when I couldn't answer, I heard her mutter something about how rude humans were before hanging up. I slowly turned around to see Sarah laughing with glee as Frank and Teddy tossed her up in the air and caught her over and over again. I'm not sure how I'm going to keep a 7-foot-tall teddy bear monster hidden from the rest of the neighborhood until Wednesday. Nor do I have the slightest idea what I'm going to do when Satan himself shows up at my doorstep. But right now, I only know one thing for certain. I'm gonna have to buy more Cheetos. It's amazing how open kids are to new experiences. When you're a kid, you can get excited about anything from cartoons and ice cream to a giant monster teddy bear from hell. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you should consider yourself lucky and forget about it. But if you're curious, you can find out more here. Basically, my 5-year-old daughter mistakenly wrote a letter to Satan instead of Santa, and well, I don't think Satan has a good grasp on what the kids are into these days, because he sent her a 7-foot-tall Frankenteddy in response. Now that you're all caught up, I'll let you in on the fiasco that happened since my last post. After a very tense sleepover in which Sarah and Frankenteddy watched cartoons and played patty cake, and I consumed a near lethal dose of coffee, I decided that I had no choice but to send Sarah off to school and try and get in touch with Hell's customer service again. The line rang once more, and a familiar voice answered. Hell customer service, how may I help you today? This is Darren Rogers again, I said. Ah, Mr. Rogers, the woman said. How are Sarah and Frankenteddy getting along? Well, I said, that's not really the point. I simply can't keep this thing in my house anymore. It doesn't even belong on this planet. Ahem. I turned to see Frankenteddy standing behind me. Oh, I stammered out. I didn't mean you, I was talking about the pet hamster. If the hamster is a threat to Sarah's safety, then I shall terminate it with the fury of a demonic legion. No, don't do that, I shot out quickly. That is preferable, Frankenteddy replied. I find the hamster to be cute. I do not wish to obliterate it. I could feel my mouth hanging open. Okay. Mr. Rogers. The receptionist's stern voice came through the handset. Yes. If you really insist that there's a problem with the teddy bear, say not a last-minute cancellation and I can get you an appointment today instead. Oh. I almost hopped with excitement. That would be great. When's the appointment? Now, she replied flatly. I'll buzz you 3 down. Down? What are you... But I was interrupted by a column of black and purple flames that erupted around me. I felt an intense sense of falling before I landed with a dull thud on what appeared to be a giant blue beanbag in some sort of cave. I saw that there were 2 other beanbags present, one exceedingly large purple one that Frank and Teddy was sat on, and a small, furry pink one that Sarah was sat on. My mind was numb as I scanned the walls of the cave around me. They were adorned with skulls of creatures that I had never imagined in my wildest dreams. There was a rounded triangular one with huge eye holes and 3 small horns, and a tiny, perfectly spherical one with no features other than a mouth. In the corner of the office sat what can only be described as a taxidermy dragon head. Sarah was staring around with the same look of wonder on her face she'd first had when I took her to Disney World. At the opposite end of the room there was a large, polished black desk that looked to be made of obsidian, behind which sat a normal-looking office chair. I didn't have to wonder why Satan wasn't there for very long, because a column of black and purple flames erupted behind the desk, and when the smoke vanished, Great Demon was sitting in his chair grinning at all of us as we were honored guests he'd been expecting. He was red-skinned under his suit, and had 2 large, polished black horns and a small, neatly trimmed goatee. "So," he began in a jovial tone, "welcome to hell. You know I don't get many visitors down here, besides, people that go to hell. And they're generally not very nice." I saw out of the corner of my eye that Sarah had crawled into the dragon's head mouth with Frank and Teddy, and they were having a tea party. Sarah? I don't think that you... Don't worry, Darren. Satan cut me off. The dragon is mostly dead. Satan seemed unfazed by my lack of eloquence. "As I understand it," he said, "you have some problem with Frank and Teddy." "You told me the problem was the hamster, Darren." Frank and Teddy's voice boomed out from inside the dragon's head. I trailed off. "I am sorry for my outburst," Frank and Teddy said. "I have not eaten today. You are out of Cheetos." "You ate 30 bags," I said weakly. It's okay, Satan smiled, buzzing the intercom button on his phone. "Tina?" he said. "Yes, Mr. Satan." The secretary's familiar voice came through. "Can you get Frank and Teddy 200 pounds of Cheetos?" 300 pounds, Frank and Teddy interjected. 300 pounds of Cheetos? Right away, Mr. Satan. Thank you, Frank and Teddy said, nodding his head. I require the proper amount of fuel to love Sarah and eviscerate the souls of the righteousness with maximum efficiency. I tried to focus on Satan as a giant, blue-skinned demon with bulging muscles and a hatchet sticking out of his head, wielding a giant wheelbarrow full of Cheetos. We make them down here, Satan said, grinning. Now, Mr. Rogers, what's the issue with Frank and Teddy? Well, I sputtered out, just look at him, he's a monster. A hush fell over the room, and I realized the blue-skinned demon was eyeing me like he wanted to hit me. We try not to use the M-word down here, Darren, Satan said. It's okay, Frenzel, he added to the blue-skinned demon. He's from Earth. He doesn't know. Frenzel huffed and stomped out of the room while, once again, tried and I failed to make noises with my mouth. Darren, Satan said patronizingly. I'm surprised at you, judging poor Frank and Teddy by his appearance. You should know better than that. I mean, my daughter is cute as a button, and she's the one who put the hatchet in Frenzel's head. You have a daughter? I asked dumbfounded. I have 700. Well, I said, trying to forget that Satan had just called me a racist. Sarah is my only daughter, and I just can't help but worry about her when there's a giant undead teddy bear thing constantly around me. I heard giggling, and I turned around to see that Sarah had latched onto the back of Frank and Teddy's head, and he was pretending to not know where she was. I have been taken in by your deception, and I am not aware that you are on the back of my head, he boomed. Satan leaned over his desk, rested his chin on interlocked fingers, and put an expression of deep thought. I think you know what I mean, he said after a moment of reflection. I know just what to do. You do? Oh, thank God. I mean Satan. Satan waved his hand dismissively and pushed a button on the intercom. Tina, he said. Yes, Mr. Satan, the intercom replied. Can you please send in Miss Hatchetface? Yes, Mr. Satan. Miss Hatchetface? You mean that giant blue demon was a woman? What? No, we don't judge based on physical appearance here in hell, and we certainly don't base names on it. What is lucky for you, Mr. Big Nose, but seriously, I feel your plight, Darren. And that's why I'm going to set you up with your own personal nanny to watch over Sarah and freaking Teddy while you're at work. But, don't you worry, Darren, Satan exclaimed. Mrs. Hatchetface is wonderful. She did a great job with my kids. Well, not the first few hundred, but she got the hang of it eventually. Satan, The knock that interrupted me nearly knocked the door off the hinges. Oh, that'll be Mrs. Hatchetface now, Satan said, rubbing his hands together. You guys are going to get along great, Darren, just great. I didn't know what to say, and so I simply slumped my shoulders and I mumbled out, okay. Satan sprang up and opened the door, and I gasped as I saw the sight of Mrs. Hatchetface, a petite, pink-skinned woman with a small, button nose and glittering obsidian eyes. Are you Mr. Rogers? She asked, cocking her head to the side and regarding me with a look of curiosity. Satan leaned over and whispered, She's half succubus, in my ear, and I shook her soft, delicate hand. Mrs. Hatchetface's tail twitched and she giggled. I've never met a human before, she smiled. Are they all as handsome as you? My mouth went dry and I suddenly became very aware of how large and awkward my tongue felt in my mouth. So, Satan clapped his hands together cheerfully. Are we all set here? I stared into Mrs. Hatchetface's deep, glittering black eyes, and before I knew what was happening, my head was nodding up and down on its own accord. Great, Satan said. Then I'll send you four back up. I can't wait, said Miss Hatchetface before a column of black and purple flames swallowed us all. I arrived back home in a rush of smoke, sucking in a deep breath of the clean, fresh air. I had almost forgotten what air smelled like without the overwhelming presence of sulfur. Miss Hatchetface landed next to me, and Frank and Teddy and Sarah landed across the room on the sofa, Sarah still clinging to the back of Frank and Teddy's head and giggling like mad. I took another deep breath of fresh air and then another and another. Soon, I realized I was feeling quite a bit dizzy and the room seemed to be tilting upwards. And on second thought, no, I was falling. I felt someone's arms catch me and I looked up to see Miss Hatchetface looking down at me. Before I felt my feet leave the ground and I realized that she was carrying me. Just lay down and relax, she said, placing me on the sofa next to Sarah and Frank and Teddy. You've had a bit of shock. I gasped out a reasonable approximation of the word, thanks, and sat down into the overstuffed leather cushions. But my rest was short-lived and I heard a knock at the door. Miss Hatchetface answered it with a bubbly, hi, but I couldn't see anybody there. Instead, she bent over and picked up something off the ground. Oh, Mr. Rogers, you've gotten another letter from Satan. She handed the letter to me and, with a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach, I opened it. Dear Dan, your name is Dan, right? I'm really bad with names. I'm just gonna assume it's Dan, and if it's not, next time you're in hell, you can let me know. Anyway, the reason I'm writing this isn't to ask for your name, but to let you know that I went ahead and took care of your little Frank and Teddy problem. The solution is scheduled to be delivered shortly after this letter. Yours truly, Satan. My stomach sank. I had already had an experience with two of Satan's solutions before, and I had gotten two demonic hellspawn as roommates out of the experience. My suspicions only deepened when a large moving van pulled to the stop in front of my house. What could be inside? Was it a giant snake demon? An even larger demon teddy bear? A herd of evil unicorns? I didn't want to know, and since I was still feeling a little woozy, I asked Miss Hatchetface to check for me. She came back hauling a giant wooden crate that must have been 10 times her size and set it outside the front door. How did we get in it? She asked me. I slowly shook my head. Try the garage, I croaked out. Oh, that's a good idea, hauling the crate up as if it were full of feathers. I heard the sound of grinding metal come from the garage and I quickly found my feet and rushed outside. I saw Miss Hatchetface half squatting, shoving the garage door up with her bare hands. She threw it into the open position and stood grinning with her arms crossed, admiring her handiwork. Wow, that was pretty heavy, she said. Humans must be stronger than I thought. There's a remote, I replied. A what? Never mind. Okay, she giggled. We better get this crate inside and crack it open. My urge to be a gentleman and help her lift the crate was not quite as powerful as my urge to not get a hernia, so I let her move it herself. When we had gotten it inside, she grabbed a hold of one of the wooden sides and tore it off with such force that it hit the wall behind her and shattered into sawdust and splinters. Oops, she giggled. Sometimes I don't know my own strength. Hercules is a distant ancestor. Right, I said, too preoccupied with the contents of the box to concentrate on what she just said. Is that what I think it is? I asked. Ooh, it sure is, she replied. Wow, Satan must really like you. These are rare. Inside the box was a tangled mess of black branches and dark purple leaves. The leaves formed little spirals at the center of which rested large, orange pinecone-shaped fruit. Only it wasn't actually fruit. It was Cheetos. I reached out and snapped off one of the Cheeto fruit and a new one instantly sprouted out of the circle of dark purple leaves surrounding the bud. So it's a Cheetos tree? I said. Yep, well alright. I turned around to head back inside when I saw Sarah and Frank and Teddy ambling down the sidewalk hand in hand. Well, hand in paw. Hey! I shouted after them, sprinting as I tried to catch up. By the time I managed to get in front of them, I was out of breath and leaning over with my hands on my knees. Where? Giant teddy bear. Neighbors, was all I managed to gasp out. I think he means you should go back inside so that the neighbors won't see you, I heard Miss Hatchetface's voice say from behind me. I nodded my head vigorously in agreement. I cannot abandon my charge to the wild, dangers of the suburban neighborhood, Frank and Teddy boomed. I shall accompany her on her quest, no matter the danger, and together we shall go to the park and catch butterflies. They're called butterflies, Sarah giggled. Butterflies, that does not make sense. Are they flies coated in butter? Sarah merely giggled in response. Said Mrs. Hatchetface. I think it'll be fine if we just get you a disguise first. Let's head back to the house and I'll put one together for you. That is acceptable, said Frank and Teddy, but it must be fearsome. Of course, said Miss Hatchetface. Mr. Rogers, are you okay? I was still out of breath to answer and simply gave a thumbs up in response. Right about then, I was really regretting my decision to replace some morning bike rides I used to take with coffee and donuts. Oh, don't worry, Mr. Rogers, I can help you, Miss Hatchetface laughed, lifting me off the ground with ease. When we got back inside, Sarah and Frank and Teddy ran to play upstairs and Miss Hatchetface set me on the sofa. You just rest a while, she said, smiling down at me. I think I saw something upstairs that would make a good disguise. Yeah, okay, I replied. I'll be here. Miss Hatchetface's hips swayed as she climbed the staircase. She paused at the top and I quickly pretended to look somewhere else whereas she turned to look at me. She laughed and continued on upstairs. What an idiot, I thought to myself. She obviously knew you were checking her out. Who just stares at the wall? I clicked on the TV and I dozed off for a bit, and I woke up to Sarah shaking my shoulders. Daddy, Daddy, look! She squealed. Frank and Teddy had been draped in a giant mess of fabric that did in fact seem to disguise the fact that he was a giant demon teddy bear. The costume, however, was anything but fierce. It was bright pink and covered in a unicorn pattern with lace at the bottom that brushed the floor whenever he moved. Are those Sarah's curtains? I asked. Yeah, Sarah shouted. Cool, right? Is it fearsome? Frank and Teddy boomed. Sure, I replied. I looked pleadantly at Miss Hatchetface. Why did you have to use the curtains? I asked. Miss Hatchetface shrugged. They were the only thing that was going to be big enough, she replied. Okay. May we go to the park now and exterminate the flies of butter? Frank and Teddy asked. We're not going to exterminate them, just catch them, Sarah said. I make no promises. Yes, I said, you can go to the park and catch butterflies, but I'm coming too. Yes, Sarah exclaimed. I am also excited, Frank and Teddy added in. Miss Hatchetface? I asked hopefully. Sure, she replied. Let me just grab some Cheeto fruit for Frank and Teddy. You have Cheeto fruit? Frank and Teddy asked. Oh yes, Satan sent some over, Miss Hatchetface replied. I am exceedingly pleased by this information. Soon, we were on our way to the park, my trunk crammed to the brim with Cheeto fruit. Me trying to keep my eyes off Miss Hatchetface in the passenger seat while Sarah bounced around excitedly in the back seat with Frank and Teddy. When we got to the park, Miss Hatchetface and I sat on the bench and watched Sarah and Teddy play for a while with butterfly nets. "So, Mr. Rogers," Miss Hatchetface began, turning those big, glittery black eyes towards me, "is there a Mrs. Rogers in your life at all?" My tongue began to feel cumbersome and clumsy, as it always did when Miss Hatchetface looked at me with those eyes. Not anymore," I managed to choke out. "Really, what happened?" She passed away shortly after Sarah was born." "Oh my, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to bring up something so painful." "No, it's okay," I said. "You didn't know." "Let's change the subject," she said, her eyes shifting to the ground. What do you do for a living?" "I'm a writer," I replied. "Oh really, that's so amazing. I think everybody's wanted to write a book at some point, but most of us never actually do it." "Well, in a way," I said. "It was my wife's death that inspired me to start writing." "Oh really? How so?" "Well, stories have structure," I said. "There's good guys and bad guys, and well, when bad things happen, they usually happen for a reason. Like the characters being punished for something bad they did or something. But in real life, they just happen because they happen. I guess I just wanted a break from the real life." I looked up to see Miss Hatchetface's big black eyes had grown moist around the edges. We stared at each other in silence for a moment, and then there was a scream and the moment was over. We both jumped to our feet and rushed towards Sarah to see her sitting on the ground and crying while Josh, the neighborhood bully, was pulling the wings out for butterflies and laughing. I saw a pink blur in my peripheral vision, and then I realized it was Frank and Teddy as he scooped the boy off the ground by the back of his shirt and began to shout at him in his crackling baritone. "You are not permitted to harm the Princess Sarah's flies of butter." He boomed out so loudly that Josh covered his ears with his hands. "You will apologize to the Princess Sarah, and then I shall send to hell forthwith so that you may be judged for your sins." "Please God, no," Josh shouted. "God will not save you from the Dark Lord Satan." But Sarah did save him. She reached up and gently tugged on Frank and Teddy's paw and said, "It's okay, Frank and Teddy. He's not worth our time. Just let him go." Frank and Teddy dropped Josh into a sobbing heap, and Josh wasted no time in dashing out of the park as fast as his feet could carry him while Frank and Teddy called out after him, "The judgment in hell is not so lenient." Sarah stared down at the dead butterflies, and Miss Hatchetface covered her mouth. "There is no greater honor than to die in battle," Frank and Teddy said. "Yeah, I guess so," Sarah replied, sounding unconvinced. "I believe that I have detected insincerity in your voice. Allow me to rectify the situation." Frank and Teddy bent down and picked the dead butterflies up in his hand, and a cloud of dark smoke whirled around them. And then miraculously, they began to fly. "Wow, Frank and Teddy," Sarah squealed. "You brought them back to life." "I have merely endowed them with the power of Satan," he replied. As I watched Sarah and Frank and Teddy playing with the newly revived butterflies, I realized that I had been wrong to judge Teddy based on the way he looked. I realized that he wasn't that bad at all. I realized that he could be just what this family needed. That is, until the butterflies started breathing fire. Fire-breathing butterflies were whizzing around my head when I got a call from Josh's parents. We had tried to put them in a jar, but apparently old jam jars are no match for hellfire. The butterflies had burned their way through. They had also managed to burn through 4 of my curtains, 1 couch cushion, and all of our ice cream, though I suspect that was actually Frank and Teddy. And yet, they seemed completely immune to their own fire. I struggled to pay attention as Josh's mom, just as much of a bully as he was, shrieked at me on the other end. "If you think for a second that you can get away with having some goon assault and threaten my child, I've got bad news for you." Well, you see, Josh was pulling the wings off Sarah's butterflies, and I don't give a shit about some stupid bugs. You know what, smart guy? I'm gonna have my husband come over there and kick your ass. Rita, I really don't think that's a good idea because... The line clicked dead in the middle of my sentence, and sure enough, within a minute, Rita's husband was pounding on my door. Miss Hatchetface answered the door to reveal Rita's husband, Mike, a heavily tattooed man with way more biceps than brains, in a tight shirt that looked like someone had vomited rhinestones all over it. "So," he began in what I only can assume was his best tough guy voice, Where the fuck is this kid who threatened my kid? Oh, Frank and Teddy? Miss Hatchetface replied cheerily. I think he's upstairs trying to undress us with Sarah. Hey, Frank and Teddy, Miss Hatchetface called out. Mike looked a little bit unsure of himself as a 7-foot-tall teddy bear dressed in a unicorn cloak descended the stairs. I have answered the Lady Hatchetface's call, he boomed out in a voice so loud I could feel it in my gut. This man wanted to talk to you about what happened to Josh, Miss Hatchetface said. I regret that I did not send him to hell, but I believe that fate shall afford me another opportunity. It seemed to make Mike angry enough that he forgot his common sense for a moment, and he jammed a finger into Frank and Teddy's chest as he spoke. Nobody threatens my family, he said through clenched teeth. I'm gonna kick your ass, bro. I am not in possession of an ass. I lack the human need to defecate, Frank and Teddy replied. I mean, I'm gonna fight you, bro. I am not designed for fighting. I am designed for loving. Would you like for me to love you instead? Mike's mouth hung open in stunned silence. Are you coming on to me? He asked, his voice much smaller this time. You know what? He cleared his throat. I don't need this. I'm just gonna call the cops. I'll see you in hell, buddy. If that is what you wish, Frank and Teddy replied, and before I knew what was happening, there was a black and purple swirl of flames around the two of them, and they had disappeared. I said weakly. Did he just take him to hell? Oh, Miss Hatchetface replied. Frank and Teddy's always been a bit literal. I'll go fetch him. She stood there for a moment with a placid smile on her face. Are you going to fetch them? I asked. Oh, right now? Oh, sure, why not? With that, Miss Hatchetface disappeared in a puff of purple flames and smoke. My head began to feel warm on one side, and I wondered for a moment if I was having a stroke. And then I caught a glimpse of myself in a picture frame. My head was on fire. Before I had time to panic, I felt a cold blast and my vision went white, and I realized I was covered in foam. I turned around to see Sarah holding the mini fire extinguisher from the kitchen sink and grinning. Thanks for all. My sentence was cut off by foam as the fire extinguisher blasted me in the face again. Sorry, Dad, Sarah said. You were still a bit on fire. That's okay, honey, I replied. I heard the familiar sound of rushing air that was usually accompanied by black and purple flames, and I turned around to see that Miss Hatchetface had returned, along with Frank and Teddy and a much paler-looking Mike. Demons, Mike stuttered. I saw demons. Jesus, Frank and Teddy, I said. Where did you take him? I delivered my guest to the gates of hell, the city's greatest hellscape. You, what now? I asked. The hellscapes are like hell's theme parks, Miss Hatchetface explained. Oh, that doesn't sound so bad, I said. Well, not for the demons, no, she said. But for the damned souls, it's more like a themed arena of torture. Oh, I said. I do not understand why the human did not enjoy his trip. There were snow cones. But they were made of human blood, Miss Hatchetface said. But they were O-positive, the most delicious kind of human blood. Miss Hatchetface's tail twitched as she giggled. Well, I trailed off. Is there any way we could make sure he doesn't remember what happened? I believe I can be of assistance, Frank and Teddy replied, and before I could stop him, he had used his enormous paw to bash Mike over the back of his head. Mike immediately fell over, either unconscious or dead. I have seen this technique employed in the black squares you refer to as Teddy vision. You mean television? I asked. What is a telly? It's short for You know what? Never mind. Very well. So, what should we do with him? I said, staring at Mike's unconscious form drooling out on my carpet. Lady Hatchetface has informed me that humans do not eat other humans. I have no other suggestions, Frank and Teddy replied. Just then, an ear-splitting scream filled the air, and I saw our neighbor Rita standing in the doorway, hands on either side of her face and pale as snow. What did you people do to my husband? She wailed, throwing herself on the ground and slapping Mike's face hysterically in what I only can assume was an attempt to wake him up. She must have not quite believed him when he said he was okay, because she slapped him a few more times just to make sure. When she was done making sure that he was still alive, she looked up at all of us. Her eyes were bulging out of the sockets as she pointed at me with a shaking finger. Ew, she said, her face so red that she made the pink-skinned Miss Hatchetface look like an albino. I've already called the cops on you freaks. You're gonna go to jail for a very long time. And as if on cue, a police cruiser rolled to a slow stop in front of my house, and 2 officers made their way slowly towards my door. Which one of you is Rita? The tall, dark-haired officer asked. I am, Rita practically shouted as she jumped to her feet. And these, she said with venom in her voice, these are the freaks who attacked my husband and son. Miss Hatchetface grinned at the officers placidly as her tail snaked its way up under her skirt until it was hidden from view. Are you the husband? The other officer asked, kneeling down on the ground next to Mike with a sympathetic expression on his face. Yes, Mike said. Officer, he whispered. These people aren't human. They're not? The officer asked, a thin crease spreading across his brow. No, Mike said. They took me to hell. I saw demons and monsters and... Okay, well, I've heard enough. The first officer cut him off, turning towards Rita. Lady, you know it's a crime to prank call 911, right? What? Rita's mouth flopped open like some sort of fish. You're acting like I'm in the wrong here? These people, these freaks attacked my family. The dark-haired officer shook his head. Where I'm from, he said, we don't call people who look different from us freaks. You can either vacate the premises on your own or you can vacate them in the back of my squad car. Rita's face took on a cartoonish expression of disbelief, but when she saw that the officer wasn't kidding, she grabbed Mike's arm and attempted to tug him to his feet. After an awkward moment of struggling, the 2 were stumbling away back to their house. The first officer turned to Frank and Teddy and said sympathetically, My cousin has a growth hormone condition too. Just let me know if those people cause you any more trouble. He set his business card on the table next to the front door and motioned for his partner to leave. Oh, and I know it's none of my business, he said, turning to Miss Hatchetface, but you should get some aloe vera for that sunburn. Not that you don't look beautiful, I mean you're very beautiful and... His partner loudly cleared his throat and patted the rambling officer on the back. Right, he said. Time to go. Of course, Miss Hatchetface giggled as she shut the door behind them. Well, that went better than I expected, I said. That really almost got out of hand. Indeed, Frank and Teddy replied. I was almost unable to purchase a souvenir for the Princess Sarah. Wait, what? I asked. Hooray, a souvenir, Sarah squealed. Frank and Teddy began rummaging around in his unicorn cloak, and I held my breath, dreading what he would pull out of it. I let out a long sigh of relief when he finally produced an ordinary-looking TV remote. What does it do? Sarah asked, tilting her head to the side. I don't think that's an appropriate gift for a child, Frank and Teddy, Miss Hatchetface said. Nonsense, replied Frank and Teddy. It is a child-friendly one. A child-friendly what? I asked. Miss Hatchetface plucked the remote out of Frank and Teddy's paw and began laughing to herself. Oh, I see, she said. In hell, the demons watch the punishments on a sort of reality TV, she explained, looking towards me. And they can select the punishment they want to see with their TV remote controllers. What? I said. But this one is for child demons, she continued on. Take a look. The remote was black plastic and it looked like any other TV remote you'd find at the store. Printed across the top in silver letters was the phrase, "The remote of minor inconveniences." Instead of numbers and menu buttons, it was covered in buttons that said things like tickle, tinnitus, and unscratchable itch. At the center of the remote were two big purple plus and minus buttons that simply said, intensify. I realized that Sarah was standing on her tiptoes behind me too late to stop her from snatching it out of my hand and mashing the tickle button as she pointed it at Frank and Teddy, who immediately erupted in roars of laughter. Ah ha 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 ha. I find no humor in this situation, but I am unable to stop laughing. Ha 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 ha. I was about to take the remote away when Miss Hatchetface caught my eye and smiled, and I forgot what I was doing. Why don't we leave them to it, Mr. Rogers, she said. I have a private matter I want to discuss with you. A private matter? I asked. Those glittering obsidian eyes were like bottomless pools of water, shimmering in the moonlight as they drew me in. Yes, she giggled. Let's just keep it between us two. Maybe we could go somewhere more discreet. Yes, discreet, I said. Great idea. She smiled as she reached out and grabbed my hand, leading me slowly across the room and up the stairs. She led me into the master bedroom and sat me down on the bed, closing and locking the door behind her, before turning towards me. One corner of her mouth was raised in a smirk as she looked at me and said, "So about that private matter." I woke up in the morning after my discussion with Miss Hatchetface feeling sore, both mentally and physically. It turns out that she wanted to discuss some things that my body and mind were both woefully unprepared for, and for the sake of maintaining what shreds of my dignity remain, I'd rather not recount them here. I'll only say that the experience left me drained and satisfied, the way one might feel after running a marathon and being beaten with shoes after they cross the finish line. Regardless, I hope it may be the first of many long and deep conversations to come. The next morning, Miss Hatchetface brought me a tray of what I'd call a demon's best attempt at breakfast in bed. She'd set the tray down on my lap as I fidgeted about in my torn and burned pajamas. I tried to suppress the deep look of discomfort that came reflexively to my face as I had my questionable breakfast. There was a large bowl filled with a mess of shiny black tentacles, still worming their way around in green slime, a small dessert plate that seemed to consist of nothing but purple flames, and a wine glass of what I surmised by smell to be pure gasoline. "Wow, this looks... wow," I said, feeling rather unconfident in my poker face. "Well, I competed in Hell's Iron Chef contest," Miss Hatchetface replied. "Really? I had no idea Hell had an Iron Chef contest." "Oh yes," said Miss Hatchetface. "Although I didn't win, the medical examiner who performed the autopsy determined that it could not be conclusively proven that it was my food that had poisoned the taster." Anyways, eat up. You'll need to gain some strength back after last night." I cleared my throat nervously. "I'm not hungry," I lied. "Are you sure?" she asked. "Because I had some grave and unexpected news for you, and I was hoping to at least get your blood sugar up before I told you." "You what now?" I asked, nervously scratching my thigh through one of the burn holes of my pajama pants. "I wanted to talk about Sarah," she said. "What about her?" "Don't you think it's a little odd that Satan answered her letter with a 7-foot-tall demon teddy bear?" "Well, gee," I replied, "now that you mention it. What I mean to say is," Miss Hatchetface leaned in a bit closer to me, and I caught the scent of burning firewood with an undertone of something musky and sweet rising from her skin. "Do you have any demon blood in your family?" "Actually, my grandfather was a demon," I said. "Oh, really?" "No." I felt her tail, soft like lambskin, slapping gently against my calf muscle as I giggled. "You're funny, Mr. Rogers," she said, but then her voice lowered to a conspiratorial tone as she leaned even closer. "Do you think that Satan answers mail from every little girl that sends letters to him?" she asked, her voice full of earnestness. How many little girls send letters to Satan?" "Well, they have to send them to somebody, don't they?" she said. "I mean, Santa never answers them, that fat old drunk." "Are you saying that Santa Claus is actually—" "Look," she had cut me off. "Most girls would be terrified to death of a thing like Frankenteddy, but Sarah seems to have a natural affinity for him. She seems to have no problem controlling him whatsoever. Can you do that?" "Well, no," I said. "But I thought that was because Satan designed him for her." "Ha!" Miss Hatchetface laughed heartily. This time I was sure her tail must have left a mark as it slapped into my shins. "Satan doesn't design anything. He just sits behind that desk and tells other people to design things." "Still though, somebody designed him," I said. "Well, yes, but he has the soul of a demon. No ordinary mortal would be able to tame him. Satan must have known that. Otherwise, he would never have sent such a dangerous present in the first place." I wasn't sure if I trusted Miss Hatchetface's assessment. After all, my first experiences with Satan's judgment had resulted in fire-breathing butterflies, a TV remote that gave you tinnitus, and a giant teddy bear who had sent my neighbor to hell. But then again, it had also resulted in Miss Hatchetface herself, and I really couldn't fault him for that. "So what does that mean?" I asked her, dreading that the answer would be anything but, "Nothing at all, your daughter is still a sweet little angel and nothing at all has to change." But that wasn't the answer that Miss Hatchetface gave me. "Well," she replied, "it just means that instead of learning the piano or a saxophone after school, you should consider getting Sarah a tutor in satanic magic." "Oh, is that all?" I asked, suddenly growing very dizzy and taking a sip of the gasoline drink that Miss Hatchetface had brought me that morning. "Oh," I said in surprise. "This tastes like vanilla." "Yes, it does," Miss Hatchetface said. "Miss Hatchetface." "Yes, Mr. Rogers." "Are my ears smoking?" "Yes, Mr. Rogers." "Okay." It took about an hour for the smoke in my ears to thin out to a light gray steam, and by that time, Miss Hatchetface had managed to convince me that getting Sarah an after-school satanic magic tutor was the right thing for our family. We were standing in the living room, my stomach rumbling as I watched Sarah lightly torment Frankenteddy with the remote of minor inconveniences. First, she gave him a pig's tail, and then she blew his ears up to the size of dinner plates. And finally, she summoned a little blue sparrow that sat on his head and lightly pecked him every few seconds. Frankenteddy didn't seem to mind the ears, and he didn't even notice the sparrow on his head. But the pig's tail seemed to be concerning him greatly. "I do not understand the purpose of this small, twirly appendage," he boomed out, craning his neck around to have a better look at it. "It's funny," Sarah squealed. "I see. The purpose is humor. I am suitably amused. Ha ha ha." Sarah threw her head back against the couch cushions and kicked her feet up and down as she erupted into wide giggling. I cleared my throat in a non-effectual attempt to get their attention. I turned hopelessly to Miss Hatchetface, who stuck 2 fingers in her mouth and wolf whistled so wildly that 2 of the picture frames on the mantelpiece cracked. I said again, noting that my voice seemed suddenly quieter, even though I was sure I was speaking at the same volume. "Sarah, Miss Hatchetface and I have discussed that we've decided that from now on, you're going to be receiving lessons from a tutor in satanic magic after school." My hope that Sarah would balk at the prospect of receiving any kind of lessons after school was quashed by her enthusiastic "hooray!" and I resigned myself to the fact that I was going to be inviting yet another demon into a household which had already begun to feel crowded with him. "So," I said, turning a little morosely back to Miss Hatchetface, "now that that's settled, I guess we should write to Satan and have him send somebody up." Miss Hatchetface opened her mouth to answer, but she was interrupted by a rigid 3 knocks at the front door. She grinned sheepishly, saying, "That should be her now." Before I could ask just how in the hell, no pun intended, Satan had managed to already find out about that, I had agreed. The door was swinging open and my heart was sinking all the way down to my stomach, and I saw what was standing in my doorway. It had the stooped, slumping shoulders of an old woman draped in an ugly, vomit-green sweater that had little yarn baubles hanging off the ends of the sleeves. A reptilian tail poked out of the bottom of the thick, canvas skirt. Slapping on my porch in the same steady rhythm someone who had been kept waiting might impatiently tap their foot. But worst of all was the face. It was the face of an old woman, lined so many times over by unforgiving years that it looked like a crumpled piece of tissue paper, with veins underneath. Its angry, reptile yellow eyes were distorted behind the thick, fishbowl lenses of its bifocals. But the face wasn't the worst because it was ugly. No, that I could handle. The face was the worst because it was the face of my 6th grade English teacher, Miss Robbins. "Hello, Darren," Miss Robbins croaked out in her trademark tone of perpetual disappointment. I gasped out. "What in the hell are you doing here?" Miss Robbins clocked her tongue in the way she did when she was about to tell you off. "I do not allow foul language in my classroom, Darren, no matter how old you are." "You're from hell," I said desperately. "How could that possibly offend you?" "Would it offend you if I used your home country as an expletive, Darren?" As Miss Robbins looked over her bifocals at me, fixing me with a yellow, reptilian gaze, I all of a sudden felt like I was in the 6th grade again and that I had done something very, very wrong, like going to the bathroom without a pass. I opened my mouth and closed it again and turned to Miss Hatchetface. "I'm not having this spiteful old biddy teaching my kid," I said firmly. But before Miss Hatchetface could respond, I heard another smattering of giggles and I turned to see Sarah standing on the end of Miss Robbins' tail as it clicked up and down, bouncing her up in the air a few inches at a time. Miss Robbins was grinning down at her, the kindness of the smile managing to take some of the ugly out of her face. "Oh yes, dearie," she said. "It's quite fun, isn't it?" I suddenly remembered why I hated Miss Robbins so much as a kid. It was because she had treated the boys like hooligans and the girls like princesses, and she wasn't such a bad English teacher in the end. I had grown up to be a writer after all. Sarah turned to me, errant strands of hair falling over her face and sticking to her mouth. She promptly puffed them away. "Can she stay, Daddy?" she asked, putting on the same look she did when she wanted an extra scoop of ice cream or an extra hour before bedtime. A look that she knew cut right through my heart and turned me into a yes machine. Can she? I looked from Sarah's hopeful puppy dog eyes to Miss Hatchetface's encouraging grin, to Frankie and Teddy's indifference as a sparrow continued to peck on his head. I sighed and simply said, "Alright," to which Sarah responded by exploding into a chorus of cheers and seizing Frankie and Teddy's paws and jumping around in circles. "I am not aware of what is being discussed, so I will simply mirror your excitement," he boomed, and I noted with pleasure that Miss Robbins seemed to regard him with an obvious distaste. "Would you like to step inside and take a seat?" Miss Hatchetface smiled kindly at Miss Robbins, but the old English teacher must have been immune to Miss Hatchetface's charm. She simply shot her a disgusted look and huffed her way into my house and up the stairs, a long reptilian tail flopping ridiculously on each step as she climbed. Later that night, I was ready to hop in the shower and wash the suit off after a particularly vigorous discussion with Miss Hatchetface when I realized that my towel was gone. I assumed that Miss Hatchetface had put it in the laundry, and so I left the water running and I made to leave when I saw her through the crack in the door. She was hunched over, holding something cupped between her hands and speaking to it. I can't explain why, but I closed the door again until just a tiny open space remained and I pressed my ear up against it. I can only just hear what she was saying. "Yes, yes," she whispered to whatever was in her hands. "The old woman is here now and she called me a tart. Thank you very much." She paused as if listening to something that I could not hear. No, it's fine," she went on. "He doesn't suspect a thing. Everything is going according to plan." She paused again, this time for longer, and I began to wonder if she might have heard me. But then I heard that familiar whoosh of air that often accompanied the black and purple flames that meant something was vanishing into hell, followed by her footsteps trailing off downstairs. I decided the towel could wait and it might behoove me to go ahead and hop in the shower. When I got out, a clean, dry, warm towel was hanging on the outside doorknob of the bathroom. I toweled myself off and I had just finished wrapping it around my waist when Miss Hatchetface came back in. "Oh, you're finished," she giggled. "I was beginning to worry you drowned in there." "Oh no, some of the soup was really caked on," I lied. She giggled again, but I saw something in her eyes that looked like suspicion. "Hey," I said, breaking the awkward silence that had fallen. "Did I hear you saying something to me while I was in the shower?" "Me?" Miss Hatchetface's eyes widened in surprise. Though feigned or genuine, I could not tell. "I was quiet as a mouse," she said sweetly. "Just reading one of your books." Sure enough, one of my books was cracked open on the nightstand, but the uneasy feeling didn't go away. And as I lay awake that night, Miss Hatchetface's little pink chest, softly rising and falling next to mine. I wondered what exactly it was that I didn't suspect.